Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Season 10, Episode 5 of the DFO Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Brock Segan. With me, as always, we got Dylan D. Berthium and Michael Beebs Bondy. Beebs, we missed you last week. How was the wedding? Welcome back.
Thanks, boys. Missed you as well. Listen to the episode, and you guys did a fantastic job steering the ship without me, which I had no doubts whatsoever. Wedding was great. It took a lot out of me. I forget that on the other side of 30, what a few weekends of putting them, or a few days of putting them back and do for you. So we finally recovered now. It's Tuesday, so we've recovered on Tuesday after the weekend. But no, it was great. And it's always nice to know that someone enjoys your presence enough to ask them to stand with you on their wedding day. So that's always flattering. But it was fantastic. I stuffed myself. So those of you who are watching the video version, if I'm just, lean back like a potato, that's exactly why. But no, we are doing good. We are so close to fantasy hockey starting, and that's enough to get me going. So D, how are you doing today? I'm excited to finally have the first intro before you. That was new. That was nice.
Yeah, you're welcome. But no, doing good, man. Excited to talk about some blue liners. Really a position we knocked out of the park last year. I know I had Bouchard as a breakout. One of you guys had Dobson. So
that would be me.
Yeah, just tons of success across the board. And we'll be looking to do the same this year.
Yeah, Beebs' bust was Tony DeAngelo, I believe. He's in the KHL. He played like 7 games last year. Yeah, this was definitely one of our better preview episodes last year. Speaking of the fantasy hockey season, I cannot wait. I'm always excited, but like this year, I'm having the worst fantasy football luck of all time. My matchups have just been absolutely atrocious. So like this year more than ever, I just cannot wait to get to fantasy hockey and start getting some W's on the card because fantasy football is going atrociously for me right now. But
I'm just the luckiest human in fantasy football. You guys are in leagues with me, and I think you can both attest to that. So
yes.
I wish that luck would just seep over a little bit to my hockey. Granted, we do quite well, but it'd be nice just we don't need to use it all in football. But yeah, no, football, it's insane. Anything that I need to happen, that can happen, does happen. But I shouldn't say this because I probably just burned myself for the rest of the year. But
my big money league, I have the most points against in each of the first 3 weeks of the season. I have the third most points in the league, and I am 0-3. So very excited about that. But welcome in to the D preview episode. Again, if you have just found us, we go through our top 10 defensemen, our values, our breakouts, and our busts at the position. We have our consensus top 10. We'll usually roll through our consensus top 15 and each give you a value pick, a bust pick, and a breakout. So let's get right into it with our number 1 defenseman on the board. And that is Cale Makar. I have him at 1. Beebs has him at 1. D has him at 1. No surprise there. He is also the consensus number 1 defenseman off the boards based on ADP, which is average draft position. His current ADP is 9.1. The only defenseman currently going in the first round. Makar's numbers in the last 3 years are absolutely bonkers. He leads all defensemen in goals with 66, points with 242, and power play points with 103, despite missing 32 games during that stretch. And in the categories where he isn't first, he's in the top 3. He's tied for third in assists, second in both power play goals and shots on goal. So top 3 across the board in every major statistical category. This guy is just absolutely insane. His only downside really has been durability, but he's appeared in 77 games in 2 of the last 3 years. And it really, I think I'm not the only one that would just love to see this man play a full 82-game season and see what he could do, because he's played at a 25-goal, 92-point, and 248-shot pace over the last 3 seasons. So just absolutely ridiculous stuff from Cale Makar. I'm sure, boys, there's not a whole lot either one of you has to add on Cale Makar that we don't already know. But, Beebs, you are our resident Avalanche fan. You might as well go off a little bit.
Are you sure there aren't any more top 3 stats you want to drop for him? Because that was absolutely beautiful to hear. Another thing I want to mention is he's only 25, which is pretty insane with the last 3 seasons that we've seen. Brock mentioned kind of why he's been so elite, things he's done, but I kind of just want to add on to that a little bit more. In those 3 seasons, not only is he leading defenseman in points and goals, he's also 23rd in the NHL among all players in points. So for that type of production, it absolutely shows why he's going that early in a position that kind of thins out a lot near the end, over a point per game. It's just it's insane what this guy can do, and just enough that people are considering him amongst some of these not some of these superstars, but we have our clear top guys going in drafts with McDavid, with McKinnon, with Matthews. But the fact that Makar's name is just being brought up in there just goes to show how much more elite he is than the next guy. I think a lot of the next defensemen kind of get themselves in tiers, and you could put them close to each other, but I think Makar just sails himself out as that next that clear number one. As Brock mentioned, the health thing, we'd love to see 82. Unfortunately, we're going to see this with a few defensemen. One that kind of stands out is Morgan Rielly as well. Colorado usually does quite well. They make the playoffs early, and they can afford to sit him for a couple games. So I don't know if we'll see that full 82. So the 77 we got last year and 2 years ago might be the best, 3 years ago might be the best we get at this time. But even if you get your 77, you're still, he's I don't think we've seen the best of Cale Makar. And I think that's terrifying for the rest of the NHL and amazing for fantasy owners. But yeah, good to see my boy getting his too.
Yeah, I think obviously, the only downside here is the ADP, right? And it's obviously warranted that he's that far ahead of the rest of the defensemen. But spending a top 10 pick on a D-man, even one as productive as Makar, is a big ask, especially in banger leagues. I think in more standard formats, that ADP makes a little bit more sense. But for me, I'm probably going to find myself, if I'm around that 1-2 turn, leaning more towards some of those forwards that we've already talked about and covered to this point, who have that 110, maybe 40 to 50 goal upside. So yeah, that's the only thing that kind of turns me off of Makar, but it obviously makes sense when you look at his production in the last 3 years. The thing that's most impressive to me is his career shooting percentage of 9.9%. Maintaining that from the blue line is pretty ridiculous, but I think it's just a testament of how he's able to get himself into these opportunities and shooting locations consistently that other blue liners either don't have, the go ahead to do so, or just aren't able to. So that really is the thing that keeps putting him head and shoulders above the rest. Obviously, the assist totals are godly too, but the fact that he's just a consistent 20 to 25 goal threat to the back end is why he goes as early as he does. But I think, like I said, in banger leagues, more extended formats, probably just a little too rich for my blood, and I'd rather go for some depth at the position by cleaning up in the middle rounds. But I think in more standard formats, the ADP does make sense.
Yeah, you mentioned who you would have to pass on to take a Cale Makar, right? I mean, Brady Tkachuk in banger leagues, that would be a tough thing to do. Artemi Panarin, Matthew Tkachuk, Jack Hughes, Kirill Kaprizov, those are the names that you would have to pass on to take Cale Makar, and that's a bit of a difficult ask. I've been touting this tool pretty much every episode so far, but our Fantasy Hockey customizable rankings tool is available on dailyfaceoff.com for free. It's part of our draft kit. You can go in, enter your league scoring format, and get customized rankings for that. And I just went and looked at it, and what it does is it compares players amongst other players at their position to try to give you a value above replacement at that position, to try to grade everybody evenly. And among skaters in a hits league, Makar drops to about 12th. Like you said, D, maybe a little bit high in a banger league, but he is around 9-10 in non-hit format. So depending on your format, Makar, might be a good late first round pick, but probably, I don't know if I've ever owned Cale Makar in fantasy hockey because of this reason, right? It's a big ask to take him that early on. Second on the list is Roman Josi, and Roman Josi is the reason that I probably never end up with Cale Makar on my team. I have him at 2. Beebs has him at 2. D has him at 2. Consensus-wise, he's actually the number 4 defenseman off the board, ADP of 23.2. I feel like I've always been higher on Josi than the consensus, but I feel like more often than not, that's been the right call. He inexplicably seems to always fall to 4th, 5th defenseman off the board, despite ranking 2nd in goals, 2nd in points, 4th in power play points, and 1st in shots on goal over the last 3 years. Over an 82 game pace, that's 23 goals, 86 points, and 282 shots on goal. Not quite Cale Makar level, but nearly identical, and he's going 14 picks later. So to me, you can clean up one of those early wingers, grab a forward, and then grab Josi later. That's a much preferred route for me than taking Makar at the end of the first round. D, you're obviously not as biased towards Makar as Beebs might be as our Avs fan. Do you kind of agree with me in the fact that you would just much rather Roman Josi at that ADP?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of guys who, they're not going to offer the floor or the ceiling of a Cale Makar, but I do think that if they stay healthy, obviously Josi being one of them, can get pretty close to his stat line at the end of the year. And I think the disparity between the wingers that you're looking at this spot in the draft as opposed to Makar, it really kind of makes more sense to go with that elite level forward in the first round. That being said, it's unfortunate to kind of how this is spaced out, because it's not too likely that if you're in a spot to really take Makar, if you pass on him, you're probably not going to see one of these other top tier guys that are, almost not quite on his level, fall back to you at the other end of the draft. So just another example how I really think, more favorable drafts kind of skew to the front end this season, both with the elite talent at the forward position and obviously on the blue line, as we're seeing here. The fact that you can get one of those top 3 or 4 guys and then still get a couple of those defensemen that, like I said, I think can at least threaten to put up a stat line similar to Makar. I think it's just a much better spot to be.
Yeah, it's actually kind of insane that you can get like a Makar light at this point, a little bit further in the draft. I'm right there with you guys. As much as I do love Makar, and every time I watch him, I make the oohs and the ahs. I think if you can get Josi a little bit further back, you can certainly create a better team. But again, but for me, it's also it's not just the floor that Josi gives us with the goals, the shots, granted the points in itself. It's the idea that the ceiling might be at maybe its highest point this year with Steven Stamkos now joining that power play. We saw him get 37 power play points back in 2021-22 when he had his 96-point season. If he's going to replicate that, it's definitely going to come with an elite shooting option now added to his power play right there. Someone who's proven time and time again that they can just put the puck in the back of the net off the wall on the one time. And we saw it the other night, actually, in preseason. Stamkos looked like prime Tampa Bay Stamkos with a one-timer off the wall in a game they were losing 6-1. But it was great to see, a little weird to see. And stuff like that makes me think that Josi could take that next step forward. He's kind of done it with not nothing around him, but very limited options around him the last couple of years. So to add in a few more key pieces, that's all it takes to get a few more secondary assists, even a few more primary assists with how good this guy is. The more I talk about him, the more I'm salivating over here. So I think he makes incredible value with where he's going off the board. Roman Josi is a nice pick. Yet again, what a horse he's been, and just phenomenal the last couple of years for fantasy hockey.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you could argue this is the best team that Roman Josi's probably ever played on, best surrounding cast he's ever had. And I mean, sky's the limit. Probably should have won the North a couple of years ago. I mean, he still is an absolute elite option. I do think, like, obviously it's a bit of a tough argument because if you're taking Makar, it's going to be at the end of the first round. If you're taking Josi, it's going to be at the, with one of the early picks in the draft. But if you just take a look kind of at ADPs right now, if you end up on the Makar route with like the 9th overall pick, you're looking at, based on ADP, like Makar, Forsberg, Braden Point in the first 3 rounds. Where on the other end of the aisle, you got McKinnon, Josi, Mitch Marner as a start. I feel much better about the Josi side of things, but obviously that has to do with the fact that you're getting the 2nd overall pick as well. So, both I think are fine picks where they're going. I just much prefer to have an earlier pick and land Roman Josi on my teams. Number 3 off the board for us is Evan Bouchard. All 3 of us have him ranked at number 3, and the general public also has him ranked at 3. The number 3 defenseman off the board with an ADP of 20.7. Not like D mentioned earlier, he was one of our breakout picks last year, and not that it was that difficult to identify that was likely going to happen, but we had him ranked way ahead of ADP. I landed him in a load of leagues last year. I had tons of shares of Bouchard. It was absolutely incredible. One of my best fantasy seasons ever last year, and a lot of it can be credited to the fact that Evan Bouchard was on most of my teams. He finished the year with 82 points, 18 goals, 64 assists in 81 games, quarterbacking the best power play in the NHL. Bouchard was 2nd in power play goals and 3rd in power play points among blue liners. And to me, when you look at the numbers, there's really no reason to believe that he won't repeat that performance or even build on that performance this year. D, you said he was your breakout last year. Do you think there's another level here, or are we kind of just looking at like, hey, this is what Evan Bouchard is now? He's going to be around a point per game guy with double digits, 15, 20 goals.
No, I think there is another level that he can go to. And like I said, this is another one of those guys that I think can end up with a stat line pretty similar to Makar's at the end of the day. But yeah, he showed us what that next level can be in the postseason. Regular season last year, he was topped off at 23 minutes a game across the full 82 or 81, that is. But in the postseason, we saw that jump up over 2 minutes to 25:01, put up 6 goals and 26 assists in 25 games. No coincidence, we saw the shot volume go up even further as well, just under 3 shots a game. Kept shooting around the 8% level that he shot at during the regular season. So yeah, I think that is his ceiling, right? Whether or not he ends up getting that much run throughout the regular season remains to be seen. But I really do think what he did last year is pretty darn close to his floor. So when you add in the fact that, this is a guy that could potentially scratch, 90 to even 100 points on a good year in terms of the conversion rates, it's a really exciting pick to get where he's going. And like I said, just another one of those guys going about a round later who could potentially end up with a stat line pretty similar to Makar's at the end of the season.
One reason why this guy could end up playing as many minutes as you just alluded to is the fact that this blue line did not get better in the offseason, right? Up front, they made some nice additions, Jeff Skinner, Victor Arvidsson, but on the blue line, especially on the right side, you look, it's Evan Bouchard and then not a whole lot. You got Ty Emberson, Josh Brown, Troy Stetcher, who are going to be kind of a three-man mix for those final 2 spots throughout the season. So Bouchard should play more minutes. Beebs, do you agree that this guy has another level this year?
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you took the route he did, because I was coming at that exact same approach. We saw the extra 2 minutes. We saw what that could do. We even saw what the extra 4.5 minutes last year could add on, plus obvious power play time. He doubled his production. That playoff production, though, that put him on pace for 20 goals and 105 points in an 82 game year. So obviously, they probably won't work him as hard as they did in the playoffs. But the fact that he has that in him against not just, he wasn't playing against Chicago's and San Jose's and teams like that where he's going to get 3 or 4 points. He was playing against the best of the best. And to prove that you can be an over 100-point defenseman against that it just shows where his ceiling really can go. And I mentioned for Makar, he's only 25. Evan Bouchard's only 24. So, if the best is yet to come from Makar, we have to say the same thing for Bouchard. I have him. I said Josi was kind of like Makar light. I have Bouchard as Josi light. So we're just going to keep going down the ladder with that. But realistically, I could have put him ahead of Josi. It's just I'm going to need to see him do it, which I can kind of expect him to do this year and just outproduce him. But if you're ending up with either him or Josi, I think you're in a great spot. And again, I hate to say it, but I would prefer that over not reaching, but using my first pick on Makar. It's Bouchard's gonna. I think he tops 20 goals though for sure this year.
Yeah, just to give you an idea again of what you could build if you end up getting Bouchard. Based on ADP, you could pair him up with Leon Draisaitl on that Edmonton Oilers elite power play. Draisaitl in the first round, Bouchard in the second round, and then somebody like Mitch Marner or Jason Robertson in the third round. Really nice start to your draft. If you land that 5th overall pick, Bouchard looks like he's in a prime spot to go in the second round there. Number 4 off the board for us is Quinn Hughes. I've got him the lowest at 5, Beebs at 4, D at 4. Currently the number 2 defenseman off the board at 17.7. So we're a little bit lower than ADP here with Quinn Hughes. And Hughes exploded in 2024. He set career highs in goals with 17, assists with 75, points with 92, power play points with 38, and shots on goal with 199. His goal scoring was always held back by the fact that he did not shoot the puck very much. It was part of the reason we were never that high on him in the past, but he increased his shot volume by nearly half a shot per game last year. Now, he likely will not shoot 8.5% again, but with the increased shot volume, he should be a double-digit goal scorer again this year if he continues to shoot as much as he did last year. So there's never really been a concern about his assist production. That's been elite. He leads all defensemen with 204 assists in the last 3 seasons. Now he's added a little bit more shot volume, double-digit goal potential, and now this is certainly a guy that is deserving of being a top 5 fantasy defenseman. But number 2 for me is certainly a little bit too rich. Beebs, where do you land here? You've obviously also got him at 4, but is it egregiously high to take him at 2? I just don't see a world in where he outproduces Josi and Bouchard.
For me, it's the goals and the shots, kind of like you mentioned. For him to take his goals to double digits last year, he needed to go from 154 shots and 150 the season before to 199 to get to that point. And if we're talking about that, a lot of these guys, the ones ahead of him, are getting 250 shots on goal, and we're seeing what an extra 50 shots can do for a defenseman just here with Hughes' stats alone. Where you're saying maybe he can get those double digits, if he shoots at this percentage. I don't think those other guys are a maybe. Those other guys are a maybe to get 20 goals. And if we're talking about that difference, for me, you can find guys who pile up assists on the waiver wire. It's a lot easier to do with forwards, and that's just kind of where they take the cake a little bit more for me. I definitely think he deserves to be in the 4th or the 5th defenseman spot off the board. That's certainly a thing. If your league has plus minus, he's likely going to excel there. He's also a power play point god, we'll say, but not so much goals. But obviously that goes hand in hand. But for me, it's the lack of shooting. He still has yet to hit 200 shots, even though last year was 199. I cannot give it to him. If his power play production goes anywhere below that 38 to 40 production, I think he becomes a clear number 4 or 5 defenseman behind these guys. The ceiling on these other guys, their ability to shoot and their ability to score goals just has him that little bit more. And when we're talking about the top 5 defensemen in the league, you got to pick at straws. There's little things that make a dude stand out from the next fella. And for me, I can 100% confidently say, if I'm looking at the board and Josi, Bouchard, and Hughes are there, I'm taking the first 2 before I take Hughes. But with that said, if he does fall at your feet, in a league, I don't think it's terrible to have a defenseman who has 100-point capability. It's just I wouldn't be reaching for him ahead of the other fellows there. So, yeah, just not for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think his goal scoring in terms of maybe some aggression coming there would be a little bit easier to overcome. I do believe, I wouldn't be shocked if his shot volume continues to grow again this year, just with, he's one of the best skaters in the league, and similar to Makar, just gets himself in a really great position. So I think they would love to see him shoot the puck even more than he did last year. So I think that could be overcame. But again, even having said that, I agree with you guys. I don't think he has the goal scoring upside as the first 3 guys that we talked about. Where I do think there's some real regression coming is at the assist totals, and it's not going to be anything crazy, but I do think the 75 he put up last season is kind of the ceiling that we can expect from him, which obviously is saying a lot still. But 13.9 on ice shooting percentage. You look at the guys around him. Brock Besser shot 19.6% last year. JT Miller 19.1%. So I just think as a whole, I'm doubtful that the Canucks are going to score as many goals as they did last year. So that's where I think we'll see a real drop off somewhere between 10 to upwards of maybe even 15 assists. So I think that's where he's going to hurt the most and may not even lead the league for defensemen in that category. And then, add in the fact that just doesn't quite have the goal scoring upside. Again, I'm with you guys. I think he's still going to be a great asset if he falls to the 4th spot, which I kind of expect him to in more competitive leagues. I'd be happy to take him there. I don't think he's a terrible value at that spot. He's not far off being in a spot where I'd be comfortable taking him. But I'm definitely looking at the other 3 guys first. More likely, obviously, as we talked about, a Bouchard or a Josi.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the Canucks' highest shooting percentage in the NHL a season ago. They went off for 109 points overall. If you take a look at the sports books, they have the Canucks nowhere near that 109 points from a season ago. So, yeah, that team's likely to regress a little bit. Still think they're a very good team. They made some nice moves in the offseason to try to help the offense even more. But, yeah, there's some regression coming across the board here for that Canucks team. And Quinn Hughes, at 75 assists, likely to feel it more than anybody. Number 5 on the list is Rasmus Dahlin. I've got him at 4, Beebs at 5, D at 5 as well. ADP is 5. He is currently 32.8 ADP, which is the 5th defenseman off the board. Dahlin has been one of the best goal-scoring defensemen over the last 3 years, averaging 16 goals per season and ranking 3rd among defensemen with 48 goals. His assist production has fluctuated, but should improve on the 39 from last year as he was held back by an 8.8 on-ice shooting percentage. We remember early in the season, lots of struggles with guys like Tage Thompson, Jeff Skinner, Alex Tuch. They turned it on in the second half of the year. We expect guys like JJ Peterka, Jack Quinn to step up this year. That Sabres offense should be better. Dahlin should be able to definitely increase the 39 helpers from a year ago. He may not provide the elite point totals like some of the names that we've already mentioned, but he is one of the few on this list that we're even going to talk about that actually hits. And he's probably the only one on this list and the only defenseman in the NHL, for that matter, that can combine 15 goals, 40-plus assists, and 150 hits. So in banger leagues, he's an absolute darling. In non-banger leagues, you just got to drop him down a couple spots. I think the offense is still there. But in banger leagues, he's an absolute smash. To me, it kind of goes like the top 3 are kind of in a bucket. Makar obviously a little bit ahead. Hughes kind of in his own bucket. And then in banger leagues, Dahlin's kind of in his own bucket. And then it kind of drops off a little bit from there. But I really, really like Dahlin in banger leagues specifically. It is worth noting that he was banged up in training camp. They are saying that it's nothing serious. It's something worth monitoring. If your draft is closer to the start of the season, certainly keep an eye on things. But yeah, current ADP of 32, is right in the middle of the third round. And to me, that feels fine for a guy that can kind of just contribute across the board like he can. D, what do you think here of Rasmus Dahlin?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think that's where a lot of his value comes from. I think he was a little bit unfortunate to only put up the 39 assists he did last season. You mentioned some of the struggles the Sabres had last year. 8.8 on-ice shooting percentage from him. The year before, he got up to 58 assists with a 12.4 on-ice shooting percentage. So I do think, if we're going to project him for this year, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle here. I'm expecting him to be, around 20 goals, 50 assists. So even in standard formats, obviously a lot of value to be had here. But yeah, you add in the shot totals, you add in the hit totals, even the block shots, 2 areas where he excelled last season. And, I'm hopeful for the Sabres front end to at least do a lot of work and a lot of damage in fantasy leagues this year. I still don't expect them to be a dominant team at 5v5, which means still going to be a lot of opportunities to throw the body around and to pick up some block shots. So he is just a category filler and a bit of an underrated one at that. So yeah, I agree. He gets a major boost in those extended formats. Just obviously doesn't offer the overall point upside, but this is a guy who very easily with, a little bit more shot volume and maybe a little bit of puck luck could threaten for the goal scoring lead on the blue line this year. So for me, that's why he finds himself as high as he is.
Beeps, he's going one full round after Quinn Hughes. Do you feel much better taking Dahlin than Quinn Hughes?
I absolutely do. If I'm going to preach how much I love goals, how much I love shots, you're getting much more production, or you're going to likely get much more production out of Dahlin. And fellas, I have a little bit of a coincidence that I found out here. Last year, Dahlin had 19 less assists than the previous season. Did you know how many goals Tage Thompson had less than the previous season? 18. So those two numbers have a real awkward connection and maybe something that could help each other. You mentioned it. The players around him struggled. He kind of struggled. But when your top shooter, your top player is also clearly struggling, that is something that could help him come back to, the near 60 assist pace that we saw in previous years. For me, it just feels like we haven't seen the best that we're capable of seeing from Dahlin, whether it's the guys around him, health, things that have happened, just within the organization. It always feels like they go on hot streaks, they go on cold streaks in Buffalo more than any other team, it seems. And I would just love to see him put it together for a full 82. And I guess that's kind of what I'm banking on here. He's proven he can eat the ice. He's been above 25 minutes the last 2 seasons. So unfortunately, we're likely not going to see him get more ice time. So it's not a Bouchard case where it's like he could use the extra time. But with that said, you mentioned it, the puck luck, his ability to shoot. It feels like us waiting for Dougie Hamilton to break out a few years ago there. And even though Dahlin's had his 73 and 78 games, I could see him definitely making a case for above a point per game if things go right for him, for Tage Thompson, for JJ Peterka, for Benson, all these guys around him that can definitely improve and help his fantasy numbers. So yeah, I'm with you, Brock. I think we're starting to see some tiers here among the defensemen, and Dahlin, for me personally, is in a tier of his own. And I like that tier personally. I'm fine with any of these guys if they're your defense one, who we've talked about so far.
Is there any concern for you guys with Dahlin, just given the fact that he might have more competition than maybe any other defenseman in the league? Like I feel like his spot is pretty secure. I think that if Byram or Owen Power were to ever move up to power play 1, it'll probably be with Dahlin. I don't think they'll ever supplant him, really, but he does have more competition with those two guys than most people do. Is there any concern there with you guys?
I think if anything, I'm more excited he has more help now than anything. It might allow him to take some more offensive minutes and not always have to be the guy locking down the other team's top unit, yada, yada. Also puts better people at his side. I do know though that Samuelson's been up there in their top 4, who's just a defensive cog. So I don't see it likely hurting him. They've shown they can lean on him before, and I think the other guys, like you said, they're going to come along for the ride. They're not going to take his spot on the ride, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the power play time. I think if anything, it could come at a cost of maybe around a minute of 5v5 time on the season, which isn't going to move the needle all that much. So I do agree that there's a lot of competition there, but I think it's pretty clear cut who the best offensive defenseman is on this team, at least in this point in time, and not expecting that to change anytime soon. So yeah, like I said, maybe moves the needle backwards a little bit, but I don't think it's anything too substantial that you should be all that concerned about from a fantasy perspective.
Just one final note on Dahlin. We talked about the dip in assist production, and a lot of it was kind of in the secondary assist category, which is more luck-based than anything. The primary assists were still there, still a little bit down from the year previous where he had 35 last year, just 24, but just 15 secondary assists last year. So it's just a little bit more puck luck. We talked about that 8.8 on his shooting percentage. This is a guy that the assist production should certainly bounce back. Next is number 6, Adam Fox. I've got him at 6. D, you've got him at 6. Beebs, you've got him at 7. ADP is 36.5, which is the 6th defenseman off the board. So we've been pretty much similar to ADP, a little bit of difference in the top 5, but Adam Fox, consensus 6 for us, ADP 6 as well. Fox has been incredibly consistent over the last 3 seasons. He's finished with 74 points, 72 points, and 73 points. Pretty consistent. He's coming off a career best 17 goals, but that was solely due to an inflated shooting percentage. So I'd expect him to come back down closer to 12 this year unless he increases that shot volume like Quinn Hughes did last year. But that also seems unlikely since he's averaged 2.0, 1.9, and 1.9 shots on goal per game. This guy is just as consistent as they come. You know you're getting with Fox, and you know it'll be good enough to flirt with the top 5 at the position. He'll have double-digit goals, probably 70-plus points, and near the top of the position in power play production. You can kind of just lock in what you know about Adam Fox and be happy with it. Beebs, you've got him the lowest out of all of us at number 7. Is there a reason you just like Victor Hedman a little bit more? Is that all it is?
Yeah. It's the shots on goal for Hedman. Hedman, shots on goal and just the power play production, I guess. Hedman has that 40 power play point production where Fox just hasn't quite shown that yet. Fox, personally, that's the safe pick. You nailed it right there. I mean, there are a few safe picks here. Obviously, Hedman's probably a safe pick too. But Fox, you know what you're getting. And I guess my desire for a little bit more ceiling pushed Hedman a bit more above him. Like I mentioned, the goal scoring ability. We haven't seen 20 goals from Fox yet. So I could see him taking that step forward if he does get towards 200 shots. Exactly like you mentioned, like we saw from Quinn Hughes. But for me, it's just I just like Hedman a little bit more. I like that power play a tiny bit more, which is insane to say because it's like comparing 2 absolute aces out there. But yeah, Fox is, you're going to get 70, 73, 74 points, 15 goals, and you can draft that and you can be satisfied. But for me, I just need a little bit more ceiling. But either way, this was a toss up in a bag, and I actually moved Fox down after doing my research. So I will admit that I even had him above him originally, but Hedman deserved it and worked his way up. D, I think you have Fox 1 spot ahead of me, or actually it's the same spot as me. So
yeah, I don't love where either of these guys are going in drafts. Obviously, pretty much right in line in terms of defenseman rankings in ADP, but I think you alluded to it, Beebs. They just don't really have that elite upside of the guys that we've talked about to this point. They're very, sturdy, very dependable from the back end, but I really do think you can, wait on the blue line position at this point, get guys in the next 3 to 4 rounds that can offer you something similar, not quite at the same level, but most of the drop off at this point is going to come from assist production, which I'm happy to kind of forego, especially in weekly leagues, like, a 10 assist difference over the course of the year. You're not going to feel that too much. So this is where I'd rather still just spend the draft capital at the forward positions, where there's going to be a lot more difference makers. And like I said, you can wait 3 to 4 rounds at this positions, get some guys that are at least going to be in the same ballpark in terms of that hard production at the end of the season, and in extended formats can help you in a lot more categories.
Yeah, you're just kind of missing out on that elite production that we get from the top 6 here, where now you're getting into an ADP spot where you're passing on Jake Gensel, you're passing on Kyle Connor, you're passing on Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Connor Bedard, Tage Thompson. Like, Those are names we all really, really like, and guys that I would much rather have over Adam Fox or Victor Hedman. I am in complete agreement there, Dean. It's a terrific point that this is just a tough ADP spot. Sure, we're in line with the overall position ranking, but it gets dicey in this range. So, yeah, like if you're not drafting the elite at the position, then you're probably best to wait a couple of rounds. I spoiled it a little bit. Victor Hedman comes in at number 7. That's where I've got him ranked. That's where D's got him ranked. Beavis, as we mentioned, a little bit higher at number 6. Overall comes in ADP 39.8, which is the 7th defenseman off the board. Since his career high 20 goals and 85 points in 2022, Hedman has averaged 62.5 points. That's 11 goals, 51.5 assists over the last 2 seasons. That's still good enough for 9th among blue liners, but he's no longer an elite option at the position. The Lightning are not the elite team that they used to be either, but their power play unit should continue to be among the league's best and keep Hedman in the conversation as a high-end number 1 defenseman in fantasy, but still just not quite that upper echelon that he used to be when that team was one of the best in the entire league. D, we have already kind of talked about Hedman a little bit. Do you have anything just quickly to add on him? Is it just like a bit of an age thing that concerns you? Like he is going to be 34 this year in December. That team is just not quite as good as they used to be.
Yeah, that's part of it. The power play, we still expect it to be really great. Obviously, Steven Stamkos was elite on the power play. We love Jake Gensel, but it'll be interesting to see if there is any drop-off there. But really, it just comes down to the goal production. The shot volumes trailed off for 3 straight years now for Victor Hedman. So I just don't think that he has the potential to scratch 20 goals like he did a couple of years ago. And I expect him to be more in that 10 to 15 goal range. He really doesn't throw the body around that much these days. So in those more extended formats, like I said, you're basically just picking him up for that elite assist production at the position. And I just think if you miss out on one of those top 5 guys, you just need to kind of not panic, as we've talked about already, and don't feel like you need to go after one of these guys in kind of these 4th to 5th round range simply because you don't have a defenseman yet. There is some good depth to be had in kind of the 15 to 25 rankings at the position, and you can kind of load up at that spot in the draft and just build on your strength at that point, which should be the pieces that you've already drafted up front. I think there's a lot more upside to be had there at this point, as we've already talked about. So yeah, it just falls into that similar boat as Fox. I just don't think he has the upside there to justify this ADP overall. But it makes sense from when you're looking purely at the position in terms of where he's fallen in drafts, just a little too rich for my blood and really doesn't make this sense or much sense at this point in the draft.
Yeah, even though I do have him above Fox, I totally have to agree with you. I don't think I'll have many Hedman stocks this year. One thing, though, that did kind of that helped push him just a little bit ahead for me is Mikhail Sergachev's now out of town. As much as he wasn't a threat last year with his 7 power play points, the year before Sergachev had 27, and we basically watched Hedman become not undraftable, but drop to like the end of drafts last season, about even the 130 mark. And it's good to see him back. And we saw what could happen: 76 points in 78 games. That 76 points alone is 2 more than Adam Fox is career high. And when Hedman's having a kind of down year and that's happening, that's what's putting him just a little bit above for me. I do definitely see myself putting Fox next year ahead of Hedman if he can take that jump forward with shots on goal. And clearly Hedman, as Dee mentioned, is taking a little bit of a step back. So with those 2 factors, I could see a switch up, but for me, Hedman will still take the cake. And especially with the less bodies or without an elite defensive player to take both ice time and power play time from him, I could see him getting back to the 25 minutes that we saw him put up 2 years in a row back in 2020 and 2021. Even though he is a little bit older, I do think Tampa's going to ask a little bit more from him. I'm hoping that little bit more will push him above Fox for my rankings. But yeah, I don't really want, at the point of the draft that they're being taken, I don't really want any part of Fox, any part of Hedman. They're a little, it's a little ugly.
Well, just to give you an idea, like D, you've mentioned there's guys a couple rounds later, even just a round later, right? Josh Morrissey, 10 picks later, is somebody that projects very similarly, if not better than Victor Hedman. Dougie Hamilton, another guy we're going to talk about in a minute, he's going 27 picks after Victor Hedman. Noah Dobson's nearly 20 picks after Hedman. These are all guys that are right there, project maybe 15 fantasy points less on a season, and you're getting them 2-3 rounds later, and you can load up at a position that is going to be, much more valuable in wingers than what you're getting with Hedman or Fox. kind of foreshadowed who's coming up next here. Dougie Hamilton is number 8 for us. I've got him at 9. Beebs has him at 9. D, you're the highest on him at 8. This is kind of the one big difference in our rankings versus ADP. His ADP, as I mentioned, 66.8, which is the 12th defenseman off the board. We've got him at 8. It's kind of easy to forget Dougie Hamilton because he disappointed fantasy managers last year. He was a 5th-round pick, and his season ended in late November. He played 20 games. Luke Hughes stepped in his absence and will challenge Hamilton for power play one time this season. But Hamilton will absolutely get first crack at solidifying his spot there because Hughes is expected to be out until at least late October, early November. So after a lost season, it's really easy to forget just how good Dougie Hamilton has been since putting on a New Jersey Devils uniform. He's averaged 18 goals, 60 points, 267 shots, and 85 hits per 82 games. The downside of that is in those 3 seasons, he's missed a full season. He's missed 82 games during that 3-year run. So there's undoubtedly durability concerns. There's maybe small role security concerns as well because of Luke Hughes. But those are well baked into his ADP of 66.8. D, I've always felt like you've been the biggest Dougie Hamilton truther on this podcast. It rings true with our rankings. Why do you still feel so confident in Dougie Hamilton as the number 8 fantasy defenseman this year?
I just think it comes down to him needing to stay healthy, which is, a risk that I'm happy to take on a guy that has a clean bill of health, even if there is a lot of injury history here. I've talked about that a lot in the past. I'll always take that bet every day of the week. If that's the only concern is that this guy just needs to stay on the ice and he's going to be fantastic, like I'll take that every day. So I don't think Luke Hughes is going to be a threat to his power play time if he is healthy this year. You just look at where they were at. I mean, a lot of people forget just how hot of a start this team and this power play got off to last year. Up until November 28th, which was Dougie's, unfortunately last game of the season, they were the number 1 power play in the league, clicking at 36.8%, which is just out of this world. It's not a number you would have expected them to keep up for the full season. But you look from that point on when, for the most part, it was Luke Hughes quarterbacking that top unit, 17%, the 5th worst rate in the league. Obviously, there were some other things at play. Nico Hischier missed a lot of time. Jack Hughes missed some time. But I think it just goes to show how effective Dougie is on the power play. That team, just having a clean bill of health in general, I think they're just due for a bounce back season as a whole. And Dougie has shown, precisely in this spot what he is capable of. That 22 goal, 52 assist season he put up just 2 years ago, really no red flags in those numbers. The shot volume was off the charts. The shooting percentage of 8%, well within his career average. So I just love the spot that he's in this year. I think that team, like I said, just due for a really big bounce back. I don't think there's really any threat to his power play time. And I think he's just going to continue to do what he did last season while he was healthy. And obviously the season before, really ever since that Devils team has taken a major step forward. So I love where he's at in the draft. Like you said, it's well baked into the ADP, the risk that we're talking about of just can he stay on the ice. So it's a risk that I'm happy to take at that spot because to me, he is the one guy, once you get outside of the top 5 that we talked about, that has the potential from a fantasy production, from a fantasy value standpoint to end up, on an even keel with those guys.
Yeah, you nailed it. For me, if we're going to talk about been there, done that with other guys, you have to talk about it with Dougie. He clearly has that ability to put the puck in the back of the net. We've seen him 8 times in his career. 8 times in his career hit double-digit goals and once hit 9. So he was flirting right there. And it takes me back to Quinn Hughes where we're talking about, he needs certain things, certain amount of shot totals just to get to 10. And Dougie's clearly tapping that in most seasons. The 270 shots in 2 separate seasons also just is amazing because I think there's 3 or 4 names ahead of him here on our rankings that don't even have that ability. So that in itself, I think I'm with Brock when it's just what pushed him down for me was just the health, the Luke Hughes, as we mentioned. But yeah, no, I think if you're getting Dougie, I would personally love Dougie. Although if I get Dougie in drafts, look out because he's for sure getting hurt. That's just how she goes. But other than that, this is someone who could, if he didn't get hurt last year, and he plays out the 82 games with the year he had before with 22 goals and 74 points, we're probably talking about him as our number 5, maybe even our number 4 defenseman this year, especially with that team around him only getting better. As we saw last year too, a down year with this injury, with some other injuries around the team, with just no goaltending. So I think things in Jersey are going to be better. And with that, all things will be flowing through Dougie. And he is, if you get him as your defenseman one, I'd be completely content with that.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say is the best thing about Dougie is that obviously there's risk there with him as your defenseman one, but it opens up the draft and creates so many different pathways for you to attack the early part of the draft because he's going so late. 66.8 is the middle of the 6th round. So you're talking about if you land that 6th overall pick, he can be your defenseman one in the 6th round, and it allows you to maybe obviously load up on forwards, but also draft one of those elite goalies in the first couple rounds, right? Solidify your crease, and then maybe get an absolute steal with Dougie at the 6th. I just looked at ADP while you guys were chatting just to see what kind of team you could build in the first 6 rounds of that 6th pick. Pasternak, Forsberg, Jake Ottinger, Sebastian Aho, Wyatt Johnston, Dougie Hamilton. Pretty damn good. I think we'd all be pretty happy
I'd take that
with that start. So if you end up in the middle of your draft, make sure you're targeting Dougie Hamilton in those middle rounds because it really does just open up a whole lot for you in terms of options. Let's get to our final 2 on the list. Number 9 is Josh Morrissey. I've got him at 8. Beebs has got him at 8. D, you've got him at 10. Consensus ranking is 8th defenseman off the board, ADP of 49.4. Morrissey has become a household name over the last 2 seasons, tying Adam Fox for 4th in points, tying Evan Bouchard for 9th in goals, and ranking ahead of Victor Hedman in power play points, where he's 9th with 47, and shots on goal, where he's 13th with 368. The shooting percentage concerns from 2023 were warranted, and it regressed, as expected. But he offset some of that regression with a bump in shot volume. He should threaten 200 shots on goal this year, 15 goals, 60 assists, and 100 hits. He's a great all-around option. To me, he's pretty similar to a guy like Rasmus Dahlin, but you just get him a little bit later. Might not hit quite as much as Dahlin. Maybe the ceiling isn't quite as high, but you're talking about Rasmus Dahlin going 32 overall, Josh Morrissey going 49. So 17 spots later, you get him around later and get very similar production profile as Dahlin. So Josh Morrissey, certainly a guy that I'm high on. Beebs, you are also fairly high on him. You got him 8th as well. What do you like most about Josh Morrissey?
Yeah, I will admit, when it comes down to it, if it's a Morrissey-Hamilton showdown in front of me while I'm drafting, it's going to be how bold I'm feeling that day. If I'm feeling bold, Hamilton might come off the board first. But if I want to play it safe, I talked about Adam Fox being a very safe pick. And when you said he reminds me a lot of, I thought you were going the Adam Fox route because he reminds me a lot of Adam Fox. You can lock in the double-digit goals, obviously, as we've seen the last 3 seasons, and the high-level assist production. But you're not going to get the elite scoring and likely not going to get the elite shots on goal. But with that, you can be super comfortable knowing you're going to get at least 65-plus points out of your defenseman. He's going to probably play 25 minutes a night, which leads to a lot of the other statistical categories if you're in banger leagues and stuff like that. And as you mentioned, he's likely going to flirt around with 200 shots. I think, if Dougie stays healthy for 82 games, I'd rather have Dougie in any league, but I do worry about that a little bit. And say I've had a bad week and things aren't quite going my way when I start my draft, I'll probably go Morrissey over Dougie. But yeah, he makes me realize that I would also much rather Morrissey over, say, an Adam Fox a few rounds earlier. I think if you're going to get nearly the same production, you might as well take it a few rounds back, even if it's not as flashy of a player. But yeah, you know what you're getting here, and I think that's why I had to put him just above Dougie. But yeah, we're throwing them all in a bag and choosing them out randomly, blindfolded, when it comes down to it for me.
Yeah, I had him a couple spots lower, but I really do think these next 3 guys, are number 9 and 10, and then the 11 spot who just missed out. To me, they're all in that same bucket. I expect and projected them to finish with really similar stat lines. And, as I kind of alluded to earlier, and you guys have already talked about, they're going to be in the same ballpark as a Fox or a Hedman, and you can get them 1 to 2 rounds later. So I don't expect to end up with a lot of Morrissey just because I think, when it gets to this point in the draft, I'm going to be more happy to take whichever one of these next 3 guys is remaining, and Morrissey going, just about a half round earlier. And, like I said, all really 3 solid options coming up here. To me, they just don't offer the upside that a Dougie does. And if I'm waiting to draft the blue liner, I love taking the swing on upside, a guy that could potentially give me 20 to 25 goals. And that's the one thing that's really missing out of these next 3 picks. But Really solid and safe picks, and their ADP to me just makes a lot more sense than a guy like Fox or Hedman.
Yeah, and Hamilton probably, I think we'd all agree, the best value on the board, or one of the best values, right? Like, I like Morrissey a little bit better overall this year, just if you factor everything in, and health is one of those things. I like Morrissey a little bit better, but on draft day, I'd much rather have Dougie Hamilton at 66 than Morrissey at 49. So Dougie is just an absolute steal, but Morrissey pretty solid at 49. And yeah, if you want to pass on those guys in the third round, Morrissey a round or two later definitely makes a lot of sense. And number 10 is Miro Heiskanen of the Dallas Stars. I've got him at 11. Beats has him at 10. D is the highest on him at number 9. Overall, he is the number 9th defenseman off the board. Current ADP is 56.5. Heiskanen is kind of that classic case of an elite hockey player who doesn't exactly always mean he's an elite fantasy player. He's still a great fantasy option, but unlike most of the guys ranked ahead of him, he'll likely still have to scratch and claw to get to 10 plus goals. But still, this is a guy that is on one of the league's best offenses and should have no issues racking up 200 plus shots and 55 plus assists. To me, the goal scoring just appears to be somewhat limited. But yeah, Heiskanen is a perfectly fine pick. I'm right below ADP. 56.5 is fine. I just kind of prefer some of these other options around him that are going a little bit later. But yeah, he's completely fine. D, you're the highest on him. Why do you have him at the number 9 spot?
Yeah, like I said, I think him, Morrissey, and I mean, I think I can say his name now, Brock, since he didn't quite make our top 10. You'll probably go into it a little bit more after this, but Noah Dobson is the other guy for me that they're all in that same bucket. The tiebreaker for me was the fact that I think Heiskanen's in the best spot to produce from a fantasy perspective, maybe pick up a little bit more secondary assists. I think his spot on that Dallas 1 power play is pretty secure. I don't expect Thomas Harley to really threaten for any PP1 time there if they're both healthy. And Dallas had a really great power play last year. Makes sense with all the weapons that they have. 24.2%. It was the 6th best rate in the league. So I just expect that to be a really solid source of fantasy production for Miro all year long. I don't think his goal total is going to be that far off than the likes of Morrissey or Dobson. The shot volume is actually pretty solid. It's just the fact that he's been limited to a lower shooting percentage than some of the other guys that we talked about. But on the whole, for a season, we're talking about a difference of maybe 5 goals. Again, in weekly formats, you're not going to notice that difference too much. So I'd rather take the swing on the upside. Maybe he converts at a little bit higher of a rate this season, drives that goals total up. And I think the assist potential, it's a little bit more variant as we've seen in recent seasons with Heiskanen, but I just like the spot he's in so much more than being on, the QB1 on that Jets power play or the Islanders power play, that I'm happy to take the swing on the upside. I've got Dougie ranked ahead of all 3 of these guys. He's going, like you said, 1 to 2 rounds later. So it depends in kind of the league that I'm in, if I've got a sense for maybe just how competitive it is. If it's more of just kind of like a home league, then I might try to play the ADP game, right? Grab one of these guys first and get Dougie in the following round. Because like I said, this is the point of the draft where, if you fade those elite guys or you just don't get a chance to grab them based on where they're going on ADP, this is where it makes sense to start building that depth at that position. And I think, 2 guys like Heiskanen and Dougie, there's some risk there with both of them, but I think the upside is really, really great. So it's a good spot to be in. And like I said, this is definitely a point in the draft where I'm going to start targeting the blue line.
Yeah, and for me, just the reason why he got pushed back a little bit behind Morrissey is just, I find, as mentioned, Morrissey a bit safer, but I think Heiskanen definitely has that ability to outplay Morrissey this year. Personally, one of the more frustrating defensemen we've seen in the last couple of years in fantasy, just because he has gotten us so excited for what he can do. If it were the playoffs, this guy's a god. We saw him put up 26 goals and 26 points in 27 games in 2019-20, and we went into 2020-2021 thinking, okay, we've got an over point per game defenseman, and he let us down and only had 36 points in 70 games. And that burned a lot of people in drafts. So I think some of them might be scared to come back at this guy because they might have got burned again last year with only 54 points in 71 games. And I think that's why he got pushed back for me, because if I'm taking him as my first defenseman off the board and he does produce only 9 goals and 54 points in 71 games for me, I'm going to be a little upset, and I'm not going to. I'm going to have to find ways to make my D better in other categories. Also, you mentioned it. Thomas Harley shouldn't hurt him too much, but just the fact that he could hurt him at all also contributed there for me. But yeah, I think Heiskanen has that ability to take his game to a point per game level. But I'm just going to need, him back at 200 shots, which we saw him do last year. And yeah, other than that, it's very picky when we're choosing these top 10s here. So there's definitely a case for him anywhere around here. But yeah, I definitely had to include him in my top 10. I'll say that much.
That will wrap up our top 10. Just a quick run back through who we talked about. Cale Makar at number 1, Roman Josi number 2, Evan Bouchard number 3, Quinn Hughes number 4, Rasmus Dahlin number 5, Adam Fox number 6, Victor Hedman number 7, Dougie Hamilton number 8, Josh Morrissey number 9, Miro Heiskanen number 10. Narrowly missing our top 10 was my breakout from a season ago, Noah Dobson, who comes in at 11. I have him at 10. Beebs and D both have him at 11. His ADP is 10th at the moment. Number 12 for us was Mackenzie Weegar, which is considerably higher than ADP. His ADP is 84.5, 17th defenseman off the board. I'm a little bit closer to ADP at 16. Beebs and D both have him at 12. Morgan Rielly comes in number 13. I'm the highest on him at 12. Beebs at 15. D at 14. His ADP is 76.9, 14th defenseman off the board. Erik Karlsson comes in at number 14. I've got him at 15. Beebs has got him at 14. D's got him at 17. Current ADP 96.7 is the 20th defenseman off the board. So we were pretty locked in with ADP in the top 10, but definitely some differences here in the bottom half. John Carlson comes in at number 15. I'm the highest at 13. Beebs at 16. D at 19. Zach Werenski, 16. I've got him at 14. D at 16. Beebs at 18. The reason I kind of just kept going there to our number 16 is, D, you kind of alluded to it, right? You want to start building that foundation on the blue line in those kind of 5th, 6th, 7th rounds. If you elect to go a little bit off and maybe punt that D strategy a little bit, play the ADP game, I know I'm the highest on them, but I've been talking a lot this preseason about John Carlson and Zach Werenski, both guys that have been there, done that, both guys that have, pretty good cases to be locked up that PP1 spot on their respective teams, both guys that have scored double-digit goals. They're point ADP 111 and 115. If you want to be bold and say, I'm going to wait on defense, those are the perfect guys to target. Shea Theodore just is next on the list at 17. He's also going in that same 111 spot. So these guys are ranked 24, 29, and 25 in terms of the defensive ADP. And if you want to punt it and try to get really aggressive and draft good forwards and good goalies early, and try to take some shots on these guys in the middle rounds, just to give you an idea, pick 111 is in the 10th round. So if you want to wait 9 rounds to start building out your blue line, I don't think it's a terrible strategy, because I do think that there's plenty of value to be had there. Obviously, it's going to be tough to get 2 or even all 3 of them, but if you do want to wait, I do think that there is some really good value there. Now we're going to get into our favorite values, our ADPs to avoid, and our breakout picks at the defense position. So let's jump right in. We talked about them a little bit before we went to break, but D, your value pick is Shea Theodore of the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, I mean, you already talked about the defenseman kind of going in that area and the value you can find there. For me, I like Shea Theodore the best out of those 3 in that same bunch. There's a little bit of risk here. The Golden Knights don't look to be as deep as they have been in recent years. There's some question about their power play deployment after Noah Hanifin saw most of the PP1 time during Vegas' postseason run. But I just think it's hard to deny the upside you're getting from Theodore here as the 25th blue liner off the board. On a per game basis, he really has been one of the more productive, or one of the most productive defensemen in the league over the last 2 seasons. The problem has been his health. I already talked about how that's a risk I'm happy to take, especially, as we get deeper into the draft. He's been limited to just 102 regular season games since the start of the 22-23 season. Still managed to score 13 goals and add 70 assists in that span. Per 82 game average, that's 10 goals, 56 assists, and 66 points, which is pretty similar to the stat lines of the guys like Morrissey, Dobson, that we were talking about at the end of our top 10, both of which are going about 6 rounds ahead of Theodore. Now, he's averaging 2.3 shots per game across that span. Shot volume like that, along with a career shooting percentage of 5.6%, suggests that a 10 goal per 82 game pace is more than sustainable. Obviously, staying healthy for full 82, a lot easier said than done, but he does have a clean bill of health coming into the year, which is all we can ask for. As I said, he did concede some power play time down the stretch to Hanifin last year, but I just have a hard time believing that trend will hold up over a full season. Hanifin has never been relied heavily with the man advantage, career high of just 13 power play points, and the amount of ice time that he's going to be taking on at 5v5 and the penalty kill would kind of make it hard to justify handing them those additional power play minutes, considering the offensive pedigree there. Theodore, on the other hand, has been a power play specialist going on for about 6 seasons now, having averaged just under 20 power play points per 82 since the start of the 2019-20 season. And I just expect the offensive talent to win out in this situation. For all the noise, that we've justifiably made about the Golden Knights' lack of depth, they can still ice a pretty formidable first unit with the likes of Jack Eichel, Tomas Hertl, Mark Stone. So the risk that comes with this selection is more than baked into the ADP of 111, and the upside really is securing a top 10 caliber fantasy defenseman in the 10th round. So I'll be hyper targeting Theodore and drafts in this spot. And again, just part of the reason why I'm a little skeptical about burning that early draft capital on some of the elite blue liners.
Yeah, and I've been hawking Twitter and the beat reporters from the Vegas Golden Knights to figure out just how this power play one might shake out, at least to start the season, because it does have a big impact not only on Shea Theodore, but even more maybe on Noah Hannafin's fantasy ranking. And so far through 4 days of training camp, the Vegas Golden Knights have not run any power play stuff. So we really don't have any indication. But yeah, just another bet on health. I think that, D, you're the highest on Dougie, you're the highest on Theodore. If you end up with both of them, it could be great, or they could both be injured very quickly. But Theodore, obviously a guy that's been a favorite of this podcast for a while, and certainly, again, like Carlson, like Rowensky, Theodore is a guy in those 10th round that is definitely a guy that can bring a lot of upside at the position if you miss out on some of those early candidates. Beebs, your sleeper is a local resident of ours, local to Bell River, Ontario, Aaron Ekblad, Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah, you guys want to talk about health. Okay, let's talk about health. But first, I think we got to mention, as we do, that me and D both went to grade school with Aaron Ekblad. So that just, adds a little bit to this, to the love for it. And I will continue to mention that every time we say his name. But no, Aaron Ekblad deserves to be a value pick, going 119.4 ADP off the board. And that's due to just a mega down year for Ekblad last year. As mentioned, injuries have been an issue for Ekblad throughout his career, but last year he was forced to miss 31 games, which led to a very ugly stat line of 4 goals and 18 points in those 51 games. I didn't love it. No one loved to see it, but that did allow him to fall in drafts this year. The 8-time 10-plus goal scorer has proven that he has an eye for the back of the net and proven that he loves to shoot the puck. Last season, there was only 35 defensemen in the NHL who scored more than 10 goals, and he's done it 8 times in his career. So he's proven that, he has that ability. And if there is only 35 in the league, if you're at the bottom of your draft, you would like someone who can fill that category. Ekblad had 216 shots just a season ago while missing only 11 games. So he's proven what he can do while healthy and while in control, or at least around their top power play. A big thing that happened in Florida in the offseason was, although they won a cup, they were kind of dismantled. And we saw Brandon Montour head out of town. Montour leaves, and with him opens up the power play 1 spot, which, as mentioned, we saw Ekblad excel on the year before when he had 14 goals and 38 points in 71 games. It led to 8 power play goals and 19 power play points. Currently, at the moment, it looks like he is going to start the year on power play 1. And for me, if I'm getting a guy on defense at the back of my draft, I kind of need him and want him to be on power play 1. Not to mention power play 1 of the team that just won the Stanley Cup last season. Only 8 defense last year had 200 plus shots on goal, and Ekblad has proven that he can flirt with that time and time again. 6 times in his career, he's had 180 shots on net, and there's only 14 in the league who did that last year. So again, he is one of the elite shot producers, which leads to goals. With a lock, or with an early lock on PP1, I'm willing to take that chance for someone who's proven they can do it time and time again. He likely won't contribute much in the assist category, but as we've seen with some of the other options today on defense, you can get assists in other areas. You can get it with guys at the end of your draft, and you shouldn't really need your maybe second or third defenseman to provide assists. If they can provide goals, and not only that, elite level goals from from the defensive end. We saw him put up 15 and 14 in back-to-back seasons. If you can get anything close to that, you're going to be incredibly happy with your 120th pick in the draft, and it could definitely make up and allow you to take maybe a Shea Theodore or a Dougie Hamilton, guys who have a little bit of risk with injury. But if that's the case, then you are just lining yourself up for a few IR visits. And I don't know if I'd personally do that. But
oh my God, Dougie Hamilton, Shea Theodore, Aaron Ekblad on the same blue line would be absolutely insane. I will say, much like the Vegas Golden Knights, we still don't have a concrete answer on how the power play is going to shake out for the Florida Panthers. They were a little bit reluctant to use Ekblad last year. Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Brandon Montour were kind of the primary options. They are both gone. So it opens up a spot for Ekblad. I think Gustav Forsling could be in the mix. And I also think a dark horse, and this is one that you need to monitor dailyfaceoff.com for these reasons, because Adam Boqvist, if he ends up somehow landing that power play one spot, is a guy that just you can stash at the end of your roster as a last round pick, as a number 4 defenseman, number 5 defenseman that has a little bit of upside. Because
they did say today that he is looking like making their third pairing, because that was up in the air at the moment, but it looks like he's a lock for the third pairing.
So, like, it doesn't really matter if it's Forsling, if it's Ekblad, if it's Boqvist. One of these guys is going to be that power play one guy, and that's a very coveted spot from a fantasy perspective. So if it is Ekblad, for sure. If it's Forsling, that boosts Forsling's already, elite 5v5 play even more. And if it's Boqvist, he has a little bit of sleeper value. But yeah, I mean, Ekblad had 20 power play points and 19 power play points in back-to-back seasons, 22 and 23. So he's certainly a guy that showed he's capable of doing it. It's just a matter of landing that role. And I hope he's the guy that does it, because, it'd be nice to see him kind of get back to a full bill of health. The other thing is they were a little bit deeper on the blue line last year, right? And it allowed Ekblad to play fewer minutes. Saw like 3.5 less minutes than he's used to playing. This year, that's not really the case. We could see him back up closer to 23 minutes of ice per game, and that could certainly help just boost, even if he doesn't end up seeing power play one time. We talked about how a minute could help you. 3.5 minutes will go a very, very long way. So, Aaron Ekblad of Belle River, Ontario. Big value at pick 119. My sleeper, I've actually got 2. I couldn't really pick between the 2, so I'm just going to cheat a little bit. My first one is Shane Gostisbehere. Now, he's bounced around the league a little bit in recent years, but since leaving Philadelphia, he has quietly put together 3 outstanding offensive seasons in a row. During that stretch, he has 37 goals, which is 11th most among defensemen, 148 points, which is 18th, 66 power play points, which is 9th, and 445 shots, which is 38th. In the early part of training camp, so we talked about how Vegas and Florida haven't really given us any indication. Carolina didn't waste any time. Shane Gostisbehere occupies a spot on that top power play unit ahead of Brent Burns, and that is a spot that should yield big fantasy numbers this season. The Hurricanes may have lost some bodies in the offseason, but their top power play unit remains largely intact. Very quality top power play unit still. You're still talking about guys like Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Seth Jarvis, and Martin Necas. So a very good top unit still, even with the loss of like someone like Teuvo Teravainen. But that was a power play that ranked 2nd in the NHL at 26.9% last year. So if Gostisbehere is a guy that is going to be playing PP1 for them this year, another 50-point season is probably in the books. He's just very quietly kind of gone about his business in recent years, and his current ADP of 153.2 makes him a 13th round pick. So another guy that you can target as a 3rd or 4th defenseman if you want to punt it down a little bit, and he should return tremendous value. I don't believe he made our bust pick, but this is starting to make Brent Burns look a little bit busty too, right? I mean, the age is certainly getting way up there, and if he doesn't have that PP1 time to fall back on, his ADP is 115.3, so it's hard to really be too busty in that spot, but not a guy that I'm really targeting based on the early training camp reports.
They got Ekblad going at 119, and they got him going at 115. I'll take the chance on Ekblad, I think, at that point, personally. Someone who's going to get that, they're likely going to, but again, this all depends on what comes out of camp on the from the Florida Panthers.
Dailyfaceoff.com. That's why you follow us. That's why you use the website. That's why we're here. All right, let's move on to a little bit more fun. We've got breakout picks. D, we'll go back to you for your breakout pick from the Minnesota Wild.
All right. So this is a guy who got a lot of love from us on the show last year. But Brock Faber, ADP of 105.8, really broke out to a certain degree last year, right? Had one of the most impressive rookie campaigns in the 23-24 class. Scored 8 goals, adding 39 assists from the back end, 47 points across a full 82. He was tasked with a pretty full workload from the jump. Power play duties were also thrusted upon him following the trade of Cale Addison and the season-ending injury shortly thereafter to Jared Spurgeon, which happened on January 2nd. And it was really following that power play promotion that he really saw his full potential recognized, at least from a fantasy perspective. He tallied 6 goals and 25 assists across his last 46 games. That's a 55-point pace per 82. The impact he made on that top unit also pretty obvious, as from January 3rd on, Minnesota converted on 26.3% of their power play chances, which was the 6th best rate in the NHL over that stretch. So prior to Addison and Spurgeon's departures from the lineup and the top power play unit, the Wild boasted a power play percentage of just 18.2%, the 10th worst mark in the league. So pretty noticeable jump there. Utilization perspective, it makes a lot of sense for Faber to continue seeing heavy power play usage over Spurgeon, alongside the likes of Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, which should give him a very stable floor as far as his production is concerned and allow him to comfortably return value on that 105.8 ADP. The upside stems from the fact that Faber is still just 22 years old. The shot volume has a lot of room to grow, which is a metric that we've mentioned on these first few episodes. Generally improves on a year-to-year basis for younger players breaking into the league. He was already around 2 shots per game following that power play promotion last season, so I would expect him to comfortably build on the 136 shots he registered across the full 82. He did only pick up 50 hits, which is a knock on his value in banger leagues, but he can mitigate that if block shots are included as well. Racked up 150 of those last season, a trend that should continue given the heavy usage he sees in all situations. So yeah, we're going to need to see some growth in that shot volume if he's going to break into the elite tier fantasy defenseman, but the opportunity's there, the talent's there. Even if he just maintains the production he put up in the second half of last year for full 82, he's going to hit the mark as a breakout. And like I said, the ceiling can go a lot higher than that. I think the upside combined with what appears to be a very high floor makes him a really good target across all formats this season.
Yeah, and it doesn't even sound like he's going to have to hold off Jared Spurgeon for power play time. Looks like his biggest, I guess, competition is Declan Chisholm, who has put up, he has actually been a pretty decent power play contributor in his own right, but still seems like Faber has kind of the easy path to power play one time this year. And yeah, after Spurgeon left last year, Faber was unbelievable, and he has an absolutely terrific first name. Beebs, who is your breakout candidate for 2024?
I'd like to say pretty mid first name. That's but that's not neither here nor there. Also, Faber probably had the picture of training camp when I don't know if you guys saw, he was flying around he had these huge glasses on. So it's out there. He showed up to training camp like that, and it's they're kind of hoping he rocks it all year. It's like the ultimate nerd out there who's also just gonna kick your ass because he's the best skater on the ice. So it's kind of cool to see. But as far as breakouts go, absolutely love the Faber pick, and kind of in the same realm, I'm going Jake Sanderson out in Ottawa. I don't know why I always have to choose an Ottawa player every year across the board, whether obviously different positions. But each time I feel like I need to do one. And here we are, Jake Sanderson currently going 131.9 ADP off the board. He's just 22 years old, a 5th overall pick in 2020, and the future of Ottawa's blue line due to an offseason trade of Jacob Chychrun. That time for him to be their future is now. It realistically was last year, but it is incredibly now. He's entering his 3rd season, and he now has double-digit goal production behind him after 10 goals last year. And I think the sky's the limit if he can only continue to increase shot production as well as his time on ice. Last year, we saw him not take a step forward offensively, and just across his whole game, he put up 10 goals, 28 points, or 28 assists for 38 points in 79 games. That had him ranked 40th among all defensemen, and that was in his year 21 season. That ranked him 23rd in goals amongst defensemen and placed him 29th in shots with 158 shots on goal. While doing that, he did it with Ottawa just having a pretty horrendous power play. It was 23rd in the league and producing at only an 18% rate. If that can go up a little bit, which it should with some of the talent around it, obviously Brady TK, Josh Norris, just their whole top 6 is expected to take a step forward. And with that, So should Sanderson in his age 22 season. Last year, he added a minute and a half of ice time, and with that came over 30 shots on goal. So this year, if he continues to add that ice time, Jacob Chychrun last year was eating 22 minutes of ice time. He added over 200 shots. That's got to go somewhere. And if it does go in Sanderson's direction and he does get closer to that 200 shot range, I think he could realistically flirt with 15 and 60 or 15 and even 55 season. And if you're getting that out of your 132 pick, that's pretty elite goal production, considering, as mentioned for Ekblad, there are not that many players who reach double digits. Only 35 last year who finished in double digit scoring. So I love the ceiling on this kid. There's a reason he was so highly touted and taken 5th overall. And he realistically has not broken out yet. And they are proving over the past 2 seasons, he has 31 power play points, that they're going to hand him the reins to that top power play unit, and that hopefully when it starts to succeed, he'll be a key piece right in the middle of it. And I personally would love to have that closing out my defenseman. And as mentioned, at 132, you're going to likely just be taking a chance on someone anyways. So I'll take my chance on 22-year-old Jake Sanderson. I think he's pretty solid out there in the nation's capital.
Yeah, in training camp today, top unit. It was a split squad thing, but he was with Giroux, Stützle, and Tkachuk on a power play unit. Pretty strong indication that he's going to start the season or at least get the first shot at power play 1. Thomas Chabot, obviously somebody you've got to hold off, but Jake Sanderson has proven to be pretty quality in that spot. And
even after that, it's like who else do you have to hold off?
Yeah, there's no really Jacob Chychrun there anymore. But yeah, Jake Sanderson, 131. I was actually a little bit surprised that his ADP wasn't a little bit higher. So Sanderson and Faber, both just tremendous young talents. Speaking of which, Lane Hutson of the Montreal Canadiens is my breakout pick. Similar to the Centers episode, maybe a little weird to have your breakout pick be a rookie, but his ADP of 168.9. If he breaks out, boy, is he going to be the steal of the draft. Hutson will be coming into the NHL at the same age as Luke Hughes did. In Hutson's draft plus 2 year, he put up nearly identical numbers, an NHL E, an NHL equivalent of 45, as Hughes did in his draft plus 2 year. He had an NHL E of 43. It obviously did not take Hughes long to become a fantasy commodity last year, posting 47 points in 82 games. It cost you a 10th round pick, ADP 119.7 to draft Hughes last year, while Hutson this year is only being drafted in 28% of leagues at the moment. And when he is being drafted, it is only in the 15th round. At the moment, Hutson has a roadblock in Mike Matheson in his way of getting to power play 1 time, but it feels like he'll inevitably be on that unit at some point this season. Matheson already plays absolutely massive minutes at 5v5 and on the PK, so using Hutson on power play 1 could be a way to keep their number 1 defenseman fresh without diminishing that unit in any way, because Hutson is just supremely talented, as we've already seen flashes of during the preseason. The one clip went viral where he made a 20-foot high pass from behind his net to the opposing blue line right on the tape. Unbelievable. Looked really good in their preseason game the other day as well, just dancing on the blue line. And yeah, to me, he's just one of my absolute favorite late round targets right now. The upside just seems absolutely massive. I know Canadiens fans are just over the moon excited to see what he can do. Coming into camp, there were some questions on whether or not he would start the year in the NHL and AHL. So far, it seems like a resounding NHL, but like at ADP 168.9, if he does, for whatever reason, get sent down, you just drop him. Like, not a big deal. But yeah, this to me, if he stays in the NHL, you look at the NHLE, the comparisons to Luke Hughes' numbers in college. If he ends up making his way onto power play 1 in a couple months, the same way Luke Hughes did when Dougie Hamilton went down, there's no reason I don't think he can't replicate the numbers that Hughes put up last year. And Hughes was more than serviceable in fantasy. So yeah, Lane Hutson, absolutely one of my favorite picks in fantasy this year. Let's move on. Close out the show with ADPs to avoid. We call them busts, but at the end of the day, we don't dislike these players. We just don't like where they're being drafted. So D, kick us off with your ADP to avoid.
Yeah, more of a fade than a bust, right? But I got Mikhail Sergachev, ADP 74.4. Yeah, by no means totally out on Sergachev having a productive season, but just an obvious fade for me at that ADP. I think a lot of people are looking at Sergachev finally getting out of Tampa Bay and expecting a stat line similar to his 22-23 campaign when he managed to steal the spot on the top power play unit away from Victor Hedman. But I think it, quite obviously goes without saying that quarterbacking Utah's power play unit does not carry close to as much value as the Lightning did. And that's assuming he even runs away with the job. The Coyotes converted at a respectable 22% clip on the power play last season with Sean Durzi running the show. So I wouldn't be shocked if the incumbent is given a lot of opportunity to maintain his PP1 time this season. Even if Sergachev is able to, wrestle that job away and really hold on to it from Durzi, the Coyotes relied on their second unit more than most teams last season, with the second unit still seeing about 40% of the power play time. So Sergachev, someone in the past who I think could offer you a steady floor thanks to really good 5v5 production and elite upside if he was ever to get some run on the first unit. But to me, both the floor and ceiling have taken a really big hit with the move to Utah. I don't doubt that he can be a serviceable fantasy asset this season, but there's just far too much risk to justify this ADP. And I do think he'll need a lot to go his way just to return value on the selection. I think you can go after very similar, if not better profiles in terms of their projections 3 to 4 rounds later in the draft. So Sergachev, obvious fade for me at this spot.
Yeah, and this is another one of these scenarios where you just need to keep an eye on how the power play shakes out in training camp. I've written a couple times already that if it ends up being Sean Durzi, his ADP of 171.9 only being drafted in 35% of leagues is another guy that just is a tremendous value late in drafts. He's done tremendous stuff in the last 2 years. And if it is Durzi instead of Sergachev, then he's an absolute steal, and Sergachev is going to fall by the wayside a little bit, and definitely an ADP that basically everything has to go right for him to hit at that ADP, and chances are pretty limited. And we've mentioned a number of defensemen on this episode already that I much prefer to Mikhail Sergachev. Beebs, who do you got as a fade this year?
D, you might want to close your ears on this one. And I hate to go after someone on any of the fellas' teams, but I have Morgan Rielly currently as my fade. Mr. Rielly is being taken 76.9 ADP overall, and that is just way too rich for me, especially for a guy who's only scored double-digit goals twice in his 11-year career. I don't quite understand why he's going this high, but I mean, I do. He's a Leaf. But for me, it's just there's too many factors that just he doesn't deserve to be up there compared to some of the other names that are a little bit safer, maybe have a little bit higher ceilings, shoot the puck a little bit more, and score just a lot more. Another thing for Rielly is he just doesn't really seem to have a grip on power play 1 out in Toronto. As much as if you're going to take someone at 77 in your draft, and at this point as a defenseman, you need someone who's an absolute lock on PP1. I say that because he only has 5 power play goals in the last 4 years. Obviously, he's not the number 1 or even number 3 shooting option on their power play, but he really doesn't seem to take it to that next level. And in the offseason, they brought in Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who is actually a 9-time 10+ power play point getter, I guess, throughout his career. So he's proven throughout his career that he does have the ability to hold down a power play 1 position. And if Toronto's power play struggles out of the gate, I don't think that they'll hesitate to bring in another name like that instead of Rielly. Another thing about going at this point in the draft, if you are, I want to have that ability to get 200+ shots out of you as a defenseman. And Rielly has only done that twice in his career. And even last year, we saw 173 and 126 the year before that. With those totals, it just scares me a lot. That's led to 11 goals in 2 years for him. That's 11 combined in 2 years, not 11 in 1 season, which again, at this point, you kind of want something like 11 goals from your guy. I kind of mentioned it with Makar as well. He plays for such a good team that they are willing to just sit him for a couple games here and there. As we've seen the last 2 years, Rielly missed 10 games last year, and the year before that, 17. And if Toronto's again gonna do the same song and dance that we've seen, where it just sucks the way the playoff picture is and put together, that we kind of know everything going into it most times, and that's what we've seen the last couple of years with Toronto. They've had their playoff picture made, and due to that, he sits sometimes, and because of that, I don't think he's worth the same value as some of the other names around him. I hate to go at him because he's a fantastic player out there, but I think he's one where it just doesn't quite translate in fantasy like we need. He needed 23-44, which was a career high last year, just to put up 58 points, which really isn't that sexy of production at this point in the draft. I thought for a second maybe he steals hits or something in banger leagues, but only 98 hits last year, which puts him just about the middle of the pack. And with his ice time, it kind of puts him lower end production. So for me, it's just really hard to grab a defenseman at this point in the draft. I'd rather take a much safer bet, a much safer pick. And I think all of us can agree, because we had him outside of our top 10, that we probably wouldn't do the same. I think if he fell to us at the 77th point of our drafts. But yeah, don't want to hate on him anymore.
I forgot to mention, I said I had 2 value picks and I only listed one, just to circle back really quick before I give my fade pick. But I have Justin Falk of the St. Louis Blues as well, as a guy that I think you should be looking to target. He's just a guy that shoots the puck a ton. With Torrey Krug out for the year, he's going to be on power play 1, and he also provides plenty of hits. Bit of a down year last year, should bounce back. I think Justin Falk, his current ADP is 165.7, only being drafted in 59% of leagues. Another guy that if you're looking for a late round defenseman to target, that's on power play 1 and kind of covers a bunch of categories. Justin Falk is your guy. My fade ADP to avoid is Devon Toews of the Colorado Avalanche. ADP currently 92.7. It's hard to knock on Toews. He is one of the league's premier blue liners and somehow just manages to find his way to 50-plus points every single season, despite 85% of his production coming at even strength. However, it is hard to justify spending an 8th-round pick on someone whose upside seems relatively capped, and he has a very, and I mean very, narrow pathway to power play 1 time. It has to be a Cale Makar injury or he will not sniff that unit. He also doesn't hit a ton, which doesn't provide much value. Like you see some of these guys in around the 90th pick, they hit. And that's where they get their value. So to me, his value can easily be replicated by other defensemen in the later rounds, much like a Justin Falk, who I have projected for just 15 fewer fantasy points in Yahoo Standard Leagues this year, and he's going 6 rounds later. So it's not just a knock on Toews' ADP and how you can kind of replicate that value later, but it's also the players that you would be passing on to draft Toews in with the 92nd overall pick. You'd be passing on somebody like Lucas Raymond, who has an ADP of 98, or an Alexis Lafreniere ADP of 105.2. So just not an ADP that I like very much. I much prefer, we've talked about it a lot, we really want guys who are going to be on that power play 1. Toews, he does get to 50 every year, but it's just a lot more difficult of a route if you don't have that PP1 exposure. And with that is going to do it for Season 10, Episode 5 of the DFO Fantasy Podcast. We have one more positional preview episode to get to. That will be coming to you guys on Friday. We're going to break down D's favorite, the goaltenders. Goalies are voodoo, but we will do our best to manage those murky waters and try to find you some gems and give you a top 10 that you can feel confident going into your drafts with. And then after that, next week, we're gonna have to find something new to talk about. We've got no more positional previews to talk about. So anyways, thank you guys so much. I'm Brock C. We've got Dylan D. Berthium and Michael B. Bondi. We'll see you guys back here on Friday.
Peace.